Welcome to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day. This is a place where we celebrate all the amazing people across the great state of Mississippi who are working to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. But today is Friday, and this is Saints season, so we have the incredible opportunity every single week to visit with my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune and see what the latest is. So without any further ado, let's bring Jeff in and say good morning, Jeff. How you doing, buddy?
Ricky, I'm doing good. Off of victory finally. It's been a long time, so it's good to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. Listen, I saw where you did the newsletter, and the headline says, "Can the Saints sustain the Rizzi role?" And some of the headlines are pretty clever. G Riz. You're having fun with that last name, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, I think everyone's due a little fun, right? I mean, that was a grim 7 weeks of losing, and you could feel the mood lighten after the game. I wrote about it on the field after the game. You know, the Saints have their post-game family and friends kind of VIP get-together. They used to have it up in a suite in one of the club lounges. They moved it down to the field, Ricky. So after the game, while we're on the field recording our post-game, and I encourage anyone that's out there, if you want to get more information after the game, after we come out of the locker room and the press conferences, we go right to the field and do a post-game Saints Insider podcast. And there's players and family members. You'll see them in the background of our video as we're recording it. And they stayed like an extra hour after the game on Sunday, just, I think, basking in the glow of victory, finally, after a long time, and it was long overdue.
Well, we talked about it, but just in terms of Darren Rizzi's spirited nature of coaching, like, as you said, kind of cut in the mold of Dan Campbell, who's had tremendous success since he left the Saints. But, if you watch the post-game time in the locker room and watch how the players came together, it's more than just being happy they won. There's a sense of camaraderie that I haven't sensed in the locker room after a game in a long time.
Yeah, I would agree. I think everyone was frustrated, right? When you put that much time and effort into things, these guys on the team are highly competitive people, and they didn't sign up to be 2-7. They started, especially after starting 2-0. So there was a lot of frustration, and I think when you're working hard and not seeing results in any endeavor, it gets frustrating. And I think to finally see those, your work rewarded, and I think Darren Rizzi said over and over, it was about the preparation that they put in. That's why they were able to execute at a higher level, and you can kind of sense it. Look, I think anytime you have an interim head coach, you kind of get this. This is what happens. I mean, it's been documented all over the league. We saw Antonio Pierce last year with the Las Vegas Raiders take the Raiders into Kansas City on Christmas Day and beat the Chiefs. And you see now he hasn't been able to sustain it with the Raiders. So that's the challenge right now. You're going to get that bump right away. You're playing your arch rivals. You're at home. A lot of factors fed into that. Now, can they replicate that? And that's what we're going to find out going forward.
Well, one of the good things about, I say the injury front has been pretty brutal, especially when you look at wide receiver, but had some key players beginning to get back, starting to get healthy, still getting some good news as it relates to that. In some other respects, as you pointed out, some less than encouraging news, but it's good to get some players back. It's good to get, for the most part, the team getting more healthy. It's good to see the offensive line performing really well. So there's a lot to actually look forward to here, isn't there?
Yeah, heck yeah. I mean, look, it's fun to see some of the younger players step up. And I think what we saw from Darren Rizzi, he made a lot of cosmetic changes, moved some cubicles around the locker room, had guys sit. Some of those things I think, you're changing for change's sake. But he also made some very serious changes. I mean, he made a change to the defensive coaching staff, basically demoted Todd Grantham, who's the longtime defensive line coach. Basically, they didn't fire him, but they kind of fired him. He's still getting a paycheck. He's still there. But that's a big move for an interim head coach. And he promoted Brian Young. And what did we see, Ricky? Well, the defensive line responded with probably their best game of the year. played Cam Jordan 42 snaps. He played 10 the week before. I don't think that's coincidental. You had a new defensive line coach there. So he made some very difficult changes, too, that paid off. So I think there's a lot of reason to be encouraged by Darren Rizzi. And I think if he continues to win, he's going to have a real shot to be the permanent head coach here.
Well, like Cam coming back and playing more, you could tell from his posts, man, he was playing it close to the vest and being a team player, but he had to have been frustrated.
He definitely was frustrated. I know he was, and he was not happy. I mean, if you saw the video of him with Brower after the Panthers game, he didn't go directly into the post-game locker room as he walked off the field. He walked down the tunnel and went back toward the field, and he had to have some staff members come console him, talk to him for 10 minutes to get him back in the locker room. I mean, this is a prideful guy, a guy that's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame. And if he's not contributing, he's like, what am I doing out here? And he knows, Cam Jordan knows better than anybody that he's not the same player he was a decade ago. He knows that. But there's not a lot of production around him either. And I think he feels like he can help the team, and he showed that on Sunday.
I forgot to check. How did he grade out in the game last week?
He graded fine. He's still like going to be a middle of the pack, I think, kind of defensive lineman right now. But they played better as a unit. I mean, we finally saw Chase Young get to the quarterback. Peyton Turner made some plays. Peyton Turner's had flashes. I mean, there's a lot of high round. I've talked to you about this before. A lot of high round investments on that defensive line. And sometimes it's not everyone wants to blame the player. Sometimes the coaches have to take some of the blame. Are you developing them? Are you getting them to play for you? And I think we saw that coaching change had an effect.
It's so interesting to see, man. It really is. It does look like Rizzi, again, it's only been one game, man, but Rizzi seems to have a lot of support.
He definitely does. And what I like about him, and I wrote about this, is, I'm a big fan of the Bill Parcells tree. I think we know that, right? I've made that pretty clear over the years. But that's where Rizzi comes from. He comes from that tree, was hired in Miami by Bill Parcells, best friends with Dan Campbell. We see the success Campbell's having. It works. That Parcells way, that formula to success works. And I think we're seeing the accountability, the attention to detail that he has had for years with this special teams unit. We saw it pay off and manifest itself in the game plan and the execution of the game on Sunday. Now, can they do it? Look, they play Cleveland. That's a very winnable game coming up. They're not playing the Detroit Lions. They're not playing the Baltimore Ravens. So they've got winnable games that they can, kind of find their way, find a formula, and maybe have a little success here. I mean, they're not going to make the playoffs. They're not going to rally out of this hole. But nevertheless, having some success and seeing some of the things come together for him, I think, are going to be important.
Well, Cleveland coming in, and I'd lie to you if I told you otherwise. I've watched Jameis Winston since he left here. I like the way he got support from the team when he was here. You hear what players like Carr think of him. They love that guy. He goes up there. Cleveland falls in love with him. It's good to see Jameis doing pretty well, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I mean, he went there for this exact reason. He knew he might have an opportunity to be this starter. He still sees himself as a starter. And, man, Deshaun Watson, Ricky, there's no way to sugarcoat how bad he was early in the year. The worst quarterback in the league, he and Bryce Young, first few weeks. And his injury really kind of, I think, saved the Browns. But they're really in disarray. I mean, if there's one franchise in more disarray than New Orleans, it's Cleveland right now. They've sold off their best receiver. They played, I think, now 10 games, and they've scored more than 20 points one time. I mean, they're awful on offense. And he had a great first game against the Ravens. Was fortunate, typical Jameis fashion. Throws the game-winning touchdown pass, one pass after throwing what would have been the game-ending interception that was dropped. And then that luck didn't manifest itself a week later. He threw 3 interceptions last week, was not nearly as productive. That's the Jameis Winston effect. I mean, that is him to a T. He's going to put the ball in there where it shouldn't go sometimes, and it's going to pay off. And then other times it's going to burn him. And I think it's going to be the same thing this week for him against the Saints.
Going to be an interesting game for sure as we continue to watch it. Listen, you guys at the Saints Insider, we probably don't talk enough about that. You mentioned doing your shows after the game, but it's really cool to see when this is essentially these Saints Insiders are the reporting team for NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, and they do a regular podcast. You can watch it on YouTube or see it at NOLA.com. But then after the game, they get together. They have so many interesting perspectives. They're all incredibly experienced at what they do. But I have seen the chemistry between you guys, and you've really done a good job with that. That's been fun for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, look, I'm the old head in the group. I get teased all the time about how old I am. So it's fun to be on there with those young guys and have their fresh perspective. A little more optimistic maybe than I am sometimes, but I think it works because we have a lot of different viewpoints.
Yeah, I would really encourage you to tune into that group. Again, you can go to NOLA.com and learn more. Hey, when we come back, we'll continue the conversation. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show for the Citizens Bank Studio. We have Jeff Duncan. It's Friday on this show, so Jeff Duncan's with us from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, award-winning journalist and columnist. He's on the NFL Hall of Fame Selection Committee. He's the guy when it comes to the Saints. So let's kind of start to break it down just a little bit. I was so pleased when I saw the grades for this past week that Trevor Penning graded out number one on the team. He has been playing well. Just as a general rule, the offensive line, in spite of all of their injuries and challenges, they have not been done poorly this year, have they?
No, look, they're playing much better, I think, as a unit. And they get Eric McCoy back this week, so they'll be pretty much intact from the starting few games of the season. And Penning it's the old axiom, Ricky. If you're not hearing your name called as an offensive lineman, you're probably doing well. And that's kind of what has been held true for Trevor Penning. He's playing really well in the run game right now. His best game of the season by far in the run game against Atlanta. He was pile driving guys, and he can do that. I mean, he's a big physical lineman, and Atlanta does not have, an elite defensive front. So it was a good matchup for him. Now if they move Myles Garrett around this week, he's going to be challenged in a way he certainly wasn't against Atlanta. But it's good to see him coming around. I think confidence is a big factor there. And look, Atlanta, again, I don't want to downplay what happened, but Atlanta's got the worst pass rush in the league. So that's one of the reasons why Derek Carr had that little extra half second or second for the play to develop downfield. Marquez Valdez-Scantling was able to get behind the defense. He had the time for that play to develop. He hasn't had that very often this year. So we'll see if that continues when they play some better defensive lines, because Atlanta was a good matchup in that area.
On Scantling, I wonder how many people did what I did. After the first catch, I'm Googling him to try to just get up to speed rapidly on who this guy was, where did he come from. I just knew enough to be dangerous as it relates to him. But man, he just hit the ground running with the Saints, didn't he?
Yeah, and look, he's got that ability. I mean, there's a reason teams keep bringing him into camp. He's a big guy and he's fast. I mean, you don't see that combination very often. I mean, we talk about Rashid Shaheed. Rashid Shaheed isn't 6'3.5", 210. He's a littler guy, and we saw that deep speed with they call him MVS. It's much easier to say with MVS. But the problem with is he hasn't been consistent enough. He's in Buffalo this year. I think he had 3 or 4 catches in 6 games. He has that ability, but then he has the tendency to disappear. Drops have been a problem. So he brought an element that they desperately needed, that deep speed on the play action passing game. And I think that'll always be there with him, and that's an important factor. But I don't know if he's ever going to be, the go-to guy like a Chris Olave. That just hasn't been his track record in the NFL.
So, the word on Chris Olave is that he is on injured reserve, and he is having a full evaluation of his situation after having gotten his, I think, second concussion this year. I think 4th in his career. You can update us on that. But any news coming out of any of that evaluation yet? No,
it's still like to be determined. I think he's going to have consultation with maybe even another consultant, and obviously his family and his agents. I'm sure it'll be a collaborative decision along with the New Orleans Saints. But as Darren Rizzi said last week, this decision needs to be irrespective of football. He needs to think about his personal health long term, but very much like Tua Tagovailoa did earlier this year with Miami, and he's back playing now. I think at some point, even this is going to be a league issue, Ricky. We've seen the Guardian caps that a lot of players are wearing. They wear them in practice every day. I don't know why they don't wear them full time. If they work in practice, we see some players choose to wear it. I think at some point we're going to have to get to that in this game. It's so violent and so dangerous. And I was telling some of my colleagues last night, I think in a lot of ways, how you look back on a video, you'll see an old YouTube video of the 1970s NFL or the 60s, and it looks kind of prehistoric and the primitive and the equipment they're wearing. I think the helmet that we're seeing today is going to be obsolete in 10, 20 years. I mean, I think they've got to find a better way to play this game safe for players without a big, heavy helmet like that with a face mask. I even wonder about the face mask. Why do we even need a face mask? I mean, you see these glass, shields that they have now. These guys reach out and get a 15-yard penalty because their hand just is in the wrong spot. It wouldn't even happen. I just think there's a lot of advancements in this game that we need, in the helmet area is certainly one.
I look at those helmets, and you can tell us more about them. Obviously, they look a little awkward, but they seem to be, when I look at them, I think about maybe an airbag in a car. Being able to take a little bit more the energy out of a head-on collision, so to speak. Is that basically the thinking behind it?
Yeah, and there's a lot of new helmets. There's been a lot of progress in developing new helmets, but I still think there's a long way to go there. The league has basically partners with certain helmet makers in the league, and you'll see a lot of different kinds of helmets right now. If you watch closely, you'll notice there's probably 4 or 5 different ones that have been approved by the league. I still think they got a long way to go there. If you think back to the old days, they didn't even have face masks. And once they put face masks on players, it became a lot easier for someone to stick their nose in there. And I think they just need to reevaluate all that down the road. And look, I know I'm on a tangent here, but Chris Olave needs to think about his own personal health long term. I think he'll eventually be back, but he's not a very big guy. And I remember when he came out of Ohio State, that was one of the knocks on him, was that he wasn't very big and he could get banged up. And this has certainly manifested itself in his pro career.
And look, you go back and look at that last hit for people who weren't watching the game. The best way to describe it, it was an absolute head-on collision. Two cars driving 60 miles an hour hitting each other head-on. I mean, there are very few people, even if you're susceptible to concussions, there are very few people that would have walked away from that without a concussion. It's bad luck. I mean, and it's really unfortunate for him because he'd had that recent concussion, and then he gets a hit like that. You don't see hits like that one too often, thank goodness, or we'd see a lot more injuries.
Yeah, well, it was also, in my opinion, a cheap hit. That's why he got fined. That's why he got penalized. Came in late. It had nothing to do with the pass. I mean, that play, that route is going to get hit by the safety. I mean, that's the route it's run. It happens but the timing of it, the fact it came in late, and it was helmet to helmet, you can't avoid that. I mean, Chris Olave's had concussions at Ohio State with different quarterbacks there. He had a concussion here with Spencer Rattler. He's got a concussion from this last one from Derek Carr. This is a problem for Chris Olave, unfortunately, something he's got to deal with.
Yeah, you unfortunately getting the ex-post blaming Carr from the ghost of the Saints. Yeah. It's really unfortunate, isn't it?
Now, my advice would be just to mute that. Then you don't have to hear the nonsense. It'd be a lot better. People would be a lot better off if they just muted that.
Well, listen, we knew one of the benefits of the Saints this year, we had a lot of depth at defensive back. We still have depth at defensive back, but we've got some work to do still. I mean, when of course we've traded off our number one and others are injured, having to move guys around. We're getting too many penalties still, though, aren't we?
Yeah, look, and I think you think about it, Ricky, put it this way. It was a great win against your arch rivals, a team that was winning the division. But I always got a but, right? Mr. Realist here. But man, you win by 3 points. It takes 3 missed field goals by one of the best kickers in the league. There's still a lot of work to do is what I'm getting at. Despite things going so well, it kind of stagnated in the second half. Once Atlanta switched A.J. Terrell to MVS, he disappeared from the game plan, and no one else could get open. That's going to be an issue going forward because that's how people are going to play the Saints. They're going to have to run the ball with Alvin Kamara and get Taysom Hill involved. That's going to have to be the game plan going forward because they just don't have the receivers at the NFL level to consistently get open.
Jeff, one of the things I noticed, speaking of Taysom Hill, one of the things I noticed that worked in the first 2 games and then Taysom gets hurt, but they were doing a lot more pre-snap moving around, and Taysom was in the game a whole lot more than he is now. I wonder why they're not doing more of that.
Well, they used him more this game as a receiver. That was a dramatic change. Now, maybe that was game plan related to Atlanta's, specifically to their defense. We'll find out more going forward. Or is this something that now that Darren Rizzi's taken over in collaboration with Clint Kubiak that they want to see more of? But the danger always with Taysom Hill is overuse, exposing him to injuries. He takes so many hits, such a physical position, the way he runs, that I think you have to have a governor switch on how many reps. You have to have pitch count on him, how much you use him. That was a concern going into this season. I even asked Clint Kubiak before the year even began. I said, do you take into consideration a player's medical history and concussion history into how much you use him? And he didn't really say he did, and I think we saw he got hurt right away. And I think that's something they got to monitor with him, get him in open space where he's not taking those big hits.
Well, we're out of time, but I enjoyed watching the Saints win last week. I think Kyle Curley, who plays the music in the Superdome during Saints games, is one of the big reasons that they won. Thank you, Kyle. Do that again this week.
That's okay.
No doubt. No doubt. Get the game
He's
ball.
firing them up.
Yeah,
firing them up.
Riz said he was giving game balls to everybody. Cal needs to get one of those.
Cal needs to get a game ball. I need to go on a little spirited run on talking about that.
I'm going to sneak downstairs for the next family party after the game.
Yeah, you need to go do that. You need to be down there. Hey, listen, Jeff, thank you, my friend. Hey, when we come back, we'll have JT Mitchell from SuperTalk Mississippi News.